What happens when a dream of a better life turns into a nightmare? This is the reality that Marianne faces. A young single mother, she struggles daily to provide her son, Felix, with a decent life. With a job as a dishwasher in a restaurant, Marianne finds herself immersed in a grueling routine where the kitchen is a chaotic battlefield and her manager, a stern man, does not make her journey any easier. Despite the exhaustion that consumes her, her love for her son drives her to keep going, even when financial difficulties and the recent loss of her mother threaten to extinguish her. Marianne's life takes an unexpected turn when Carla, the jealous wife of the restaurant owner, sets a trap, falsely accusing her of theft. This betrayal leads to her losing her job, leaving her devastated and unsure of how she will support Felix. Anguish envelopes her, but luck smiles upon her when she discovers that she has inherited her grandfather's house, a place she barely knew that could represent new hope. Upon arriving at the house, Marianne is confronted with a shocking scene. A man named Vincent is tied up in the basement, a victim of betrayal by his childhood best friend. By freeing him, Marianne begins an unexpected friendship that, over time, transforms into a deep love. Vincent, with his own emotional baggage, becomes an ally in her fight for a better life, helping her to create a small sewing business in her new home. As their relationship strengthens, Vincent becomes a father figure for Felix, filling a void that Marianne's life has always had. However, the story doesn't stop there. Bernard, the restaurant owner and now revealed to be Marianne's biological father, appears seeking redemption. His request for forgiveness forces Marianne to confront her past and decide if she is willing to rebuild a family relationship she has always dreamed of but never had. What Marianne could not imagine is that by forgiving, she would open herself up to a future full of love and reconciliation. In the end, she marries Vincent, who adopts Felix as his own son. Together, they transform her grandfather's house into a home filled with love and tranquility, where they finally find the peace they so longed for. Marianne not only overcomes her adversities but also learns the importance of family, forgiveness, and true love, showing that even in the darkest situations, there is always a light that can guide the way. Marianne stood in the kitchen of the restaurant, the strong smell of detergent and fried food invading her nostrils. Her hands, calloused and cut, never stopped working. The noise of plates clattering against each other echoed in her mind, a chaotic symphony that seemed to have no end. She looked at the clock, counting the minutes until she could return home and hug Felix, her little ray of sunshine. However, the pressure of daily life weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the hope for a better future seemed increasingly distant. The stress at work was mounting, especially with Carla, the owner's wife, around. Carla was a bitter woman, always looking for someone to take out her frustrations on. When Marianne heard whispers about a supposed shortage of money at the restaurant, her heart sank. She knew that if something happened, she would be the first one blamed. The tension grew each day, and the shadow of betrayal seemed to follow Marianne with every step she took. One day, after yet another exhausting shift, the situation became unbearable. Carla, with an evil glare, set a trap. She accused Marianne of theft, and the words cut like knives. "You don't belong here," Carla said with a cruel smile. The manager did not hesitate to fire her. The feeling of the ground crumbling beneath her feet was overwhelming. Marianne felt that all the effort she had made was being thrown away. How could she support Felix now? Panic took over her, and tears streamed down her face as she left the restaurant for the last time. In the midst of this storm, the news of her inheritance of her grandfather's house came as a ray of hope. Although she barely knew the place, The idea of escaping that suffocating life and starting anew in a new home felt like a dream. However, upon arriving at the house, reality hit her like a punch in the stomach. Finding Vincent tied up in the basement was a shock. He was in a desperate situation, just like her. It was as if the universe had sent her someone who also needed help. The friendship that blossomed between them was, at first, a mutual support. Vincent, a man with a complicated past, had faced his own battle, and Marianne felt drawn to the strength he exuded. However, the challenges did not stop there. From the moment they decided to work together, many obstacles arose. The lack of money and resources made building a small sewing business extremely difficult. The sewing machines were expensive, and the space in the house was limited. Marianne began to question whether she truly had the strength to face yet another battle. Marianne's relationship with Felix also became complex. The boy sensed the tension at home and often asked why Mommy was sad. Guilt gnawed at Marianne, for her son deserved more. She found herself forced to reflect on her deepest beliefs. What did it really mean to be a good mother? Was it enough to just work hard and fight for a better future, or was there more she could do? During this time, the figure of Bernard, the restaurant owner, began to resurface. He was a reminder of a past that Marianne wished to forget, but his presence was undeniable. The man who had fired her was now seeking reconciliation. His request for forgiveness brought past wounds to the surface. Marianne found herself facing a dilemma. Would she be able to forgive someone who had betrayed her so deeply? This decision required a confrontation not only with Bernard but also with her own pain and resentment. The days had become an emotional roller coaster. Marianne struggled to balance the new business, care for Felix, and deal with her own heartbreak. The nights were long and full of uncertainties, and fears began to haunt her. Would Vincent, despite all his support, also grow tired of her? What if her past continued to torment her, preventing her from moving forward? The difficulties were intense, and at many moments, Marianne felt like she was on the brink of despair. Every small advance seemed like it could crumble at any moment. However, the love that started to bloom between her and Vincent also became an anchor. The connection they built became a light in the darkness, and even with all the challenges, the hope for a better future began to form slowly. Marianne realized that the life she had always wanted was shaping itself in an unexpected way, and that each obstacle, every tear, and every shared laugh were part of her journey of self-discovery and overcoming. The struggle would not be easy, but she was determined to face whatever came her way, not just for herself, but for Felix and now for Vincent as well. Marianne was consumed by her worries, and the pressure increased with each passing day. As she tried to organize the small sewing workshop she had set up in her grandfather's living room, the financial difficulties became a heavy burden on her shoulders. The space was small and poorly lit, and the sewing machines they had managed to acquire were used and cheap, but they didn't work very well. Often, the seams would unravel, and she found herself having to redo the work. This left her frustrated, and with each mistake, the self-confidence she was beginning to build drained away. Felix, on his part, was becoming increasingly restless. The boy sensed the tension in the air, and in his small attempts to comfort his mother, he ended up asking if she was sad or if they could go back to having a normal life. Felix's questions made Marianne feel a lump in her throat, as she didn't know how to explain that she was struggling to start over from scratch. The idea that her son could be affected by her failures tormented her. Meanwhile, Vincent was trying to help as best as he could, but his own past was haunting him. He was a man with difficult experiences, and even with the determination to build a better future, The shadows that followed him made his internal struggle even more intense. Some nights, he would get lost in thought, and Marianne noticed the sadness in his eyes. The connection they had strengthened, but Vincent's insecurities began to surface. He wondered if he deserved the happiness he was trying to build alongside Marianne and Felix. The tension mounted when, on a particularly difficult day, one of the clients they had gained at the workshop decided to cancel a large order. Marianne was devastated. The cancellation not only meant a financial loss but also a blow to her self-esteem. She felt like she was disappointing Vincent and, most importantly, herself. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain the situation to Felix, who simply hugged her, not fully understanding but offering the comfort only a child could give. That same week, Bernard, Marianne's former boss, reappeared in her life. He wanted to talk and apologize. At first, she hesitated, but curiosity led her to accept a coffee. During the conversation, Bernard expressed regret and offered help for her new sewing business. This left Marianne in a dilemma. How could she trust someone who had fired her so cruelly? But the idea of having financial support and the resources he could offer left her confused. The struggle between the past and the future consumed her. Meanwhile, Vincent watched the interaction between the two with concern. He had already opened up about his own insecurities, and seeing Marianne close to Bernard made him feel a shadow of jealousy. For him, Bernard's presence was a reminder of what he could lose. The tension between them grew, and in a heated argument, Marianne found herself defending her decision to meet Bernard, while Vincent insisted that she didn't need him. The friendship they had built began to be tested, and each of them felt isolated in their own pain. The situation became even more complicated when an old friend of Vincent's showed up, bringing news from his past. He revealed that some people were still after Vincent, demanding debts he thought he had left behind. Fear settled between them, and the sense of insecurity invaded the house. Marianne feared that Vincent's past could ruin everything they had built together. Now, not only did their future seem uncertain, but so did their safety and that of Felix. The nights grew even longer, and Marianne began to question whether she truly had what it took to face all those challenges. The pressure to succeed in her new venture, combined with the growing tensions at home, left her exhausted. In a moment of despair, she found herself wondering if she should give up everything and return to a job that made her unhappy but provided financial security. It was then that a heartfelt conversation with Felix made her realize that she needed to be brave. The boy, in his innocence, simply reminded her of how strong she was and that she had always taught him the importance of fighting for dreams. That simple declaration made her reflect on her life lessons and the strength she still had within her. She knew she needed to face her fears, not just for her happiness, but for Felix's happiness and for the friendship she was building with Vincent. Determined to rise again, Marianne decided it was time to confront each obstacle head-on. Life wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to fight. With Vincent's help, she set out to seek new clients while also working on her relationship. The friendship they had would face tests, but Marianne was determined not to let the ghosts of the past separate them. It was time to turn pain into strength and use every experience to build a better future. The tension in Marianne's life reached a critical point. After weeks of uncertainty and frustration, she decided she needed a new push. With Vincent's help, she sought new clients and worked diligently on her products. However, one day, while organizing the workshop, a letter arrived at her home, addressed to her. The sender was unknown, but upon opening the envelope, her heart sank. It was a notification of an old debt that she thought had been settled. The amount was exorbitant, and once again, the feeling of failure consumed her. Marianne sat on the floor, the letters swaying between her hands. It was as if a shadow had settled in her chest, darkening all her hopes. Felix's words, which had once encouraged her to fight, now seemed distant. She felt surrounded by a labyrinth of problems that seemed to have no way out. What would she do now? The debt was not just a financial issue, but an open wound that reminded her of her past failures. That night, as she tried to sleep, insecurities came to the surface. She remembered how Bernard had fired her without a second thought and how her dream of having a workshop seemed more and more like a house of cards about to collapse. The idea of going back to work for him, even if it was a temporary solution, tormented her. But at the same time, the prospect of giving up everything and surrendering to mediocrity left her even more distressed. Meanwhile, Vincent, who noticed Marianne's change in mood, became worried. He also felt trapped in his own struggle, and the revelation of the old debt only added to his emotional weight. He wanted to help, but the words seemed to escape him. The connection they had built was being tested, and he didn't know how to save it. In a tense conversation, he confronted her about the letter, and Marianne, overwhelmed by the pressure, decided to open her heart. "I don't know if I'm capable, Vincent. This debt, it's like a ghost from my past that won't let me be. What if I fail again? What if Bernard isn't the solution I hope for?" Her gaze was filled with despair, and Vincent realized that the weight she was carrying was even greater than he had imagined. It was in that moment of vulnerability that Vincent shared his own past. He spoke about the debts he had accumulated and how he had tried to get rid of them. "I've also been at rock bottom, Marianne. But it was when I decided to face everything head-on that I managed to take the first step toward change. You're not alone in this." Vincent's words were like a breath of fresh air amid the chaos. Marianne realized that it wasn't just the financial pressure that isolated her, but also the lack of communication. By sharing their struggles, they could find a way together. The trust they had cultivated began to bloom again, and with that, Marianne's determination was renewed. The next morning, determined not to let fear control her, Marianne chose to face the situation. She met with a lawyer to better understand the debt and seek solutions. During the conversation, she realized there were options she hadn't considered before. There were possibilities for renegotiation and even a chance for an agreement that could ease her burden. With this new perspective, Marianne felt stronger. She began to devise a plan, not just to deal with the debt, but also to expand her workshop. The idea of Bernard as a potential ally started to make sense, but she was aware that she needed to be cautious. Trust is not rebuilt overnight. Meanwhile, the friendship between Marianne and Vincent deepened. They began to support each other more, exchanging ideas and plans for the future. What once seemed like a burden was now transforming into a joint project. The strength they found in each other propelled them forward, and together, they started to carve a new path. Marianne realized that life was not just a series of successes or failures, but a continuous journey of learning and growth. The debt, which had once seemed an insurmountable barrier, was now just one of many challenges she would face. With Vincent's support and Felix's love, she was determined to turn every obstacle into an opportunity. The true measure of success was not the absence of problems, but the ability to deal with them with courage and resilience. The future was still uncertain, but now, with renewed hope, Marianne was ready to face it head-on. Marianne woke up that morning with a mix of anxiety and determination. The weight of the debt was still present, but now she had a plan. Looking out the window, she saw the sun rising, bringing a new light that seemed to reflect her state of mind. She remembered Vincent's words. He had faced similar difficulties, and his courage inspired her to move forward. It was time to take action, After breakfast, Marianne sat at the table with a notebook and a pen. Calmly, she began to list the steps she needed to take. First, she would need to reorganize her finances, followed by renegotiating the debt. The idea of speaking with a lawyer again made her nervous, but she knew it was a necessary step. What once felt like a burden had now become an opportunity for a fresh start. In the following days, Marianne threw herself into her work. The studio, which had once felt like a suffocating space, now pulsed with new ideas. She began creating pieces that reflected her journey. Every stitched line, every chosen color, was a cry of resistance. Vincent, for his part, was always nearby, offering support and encouragement. They started working together, exchanging ideas and helping each other overcome challenges. However, new obstacles began to arise. The pressure to be productive increased, and Marianne felt anxiety building up. Sleepless nights began to become frequent, and sometimes she found herself questioning whether she could really handle everything. The shadow of debt still followed her, and there were moments when the fear of failure paralyzed her. She tried to keep her head up, but doubt was always lurking. On one of those nights when uncertainties kept her awake, Marianne decided she needed to vent. She picked up the phone and called Felix, her former mentor. His voice echoed familiar and comforting. Hearing her concerns, Felix encouraged her, reminding her that every challenge was a disguised opportunity. That conversation helped clear her mind. Felix's presence, even from a distance, brought unexpected comfort. The following week, Marianne had to face a new reality. The lawyer informed her that renegotiating the debt would not be as simple as she had hoped. There were additional fees and tight deadlines that left her even more distressed. She left the office with a knot in her stomach and the feeling that she was losing control again. Upon returning to the studio, frustration enveloped her like a thick fog. Vincent, noticing that something was wrong, approached her. He asked, "What happened?" his concern evident. Marianne hesitated, but the need to share her emotions pushed her to open up. "It's more complicated than I thought. I feel trapped, like there's no way out." Tears began to slip down her face, and Vincent wrapped her in a comforting embrace. "You are not alone, Marianne. We will find a solution together," he said firmly. That simple affirmation brought momentary relief. Marianne realized that, although the obstacles were real and frightening, the partnership she had built with Vincent was a valuable resource. Together, they could face any storm that came their way. In the following days, Marianne and Vincent sat down to plan. They divided the tasks, and Marianne began to focus on her art. With Vincent's help, she organized a small exhibition in the studio to showcase her new creations. The idea was to attract new clients and generate a stream of income that could help ease her financial situation. The event was a way to rekindle hope and demonstrate the strength they had found in each other. On the night of the exhibition, the studio was filled with people. Marianne was nervous, but when she looked at Vincent's encouraging face from afar, she felt a surge of confidence. People admired her pieces, asking questions and praising her work. The energy in the room was contagious, and Marianne began to feel that, perhaps, she was on the right path. However, even with the exhibition, the worries did not vanish. Some sales were not enough to cover the debt, and Marianne knew there was still much work ahead. As the days passed, she began to understand that her journey would not be linear. There would be ups and downs, and that was part of the process. The sleepless nights continued, but somehow, Marianne felt more prepared to face them. She had learned that vulnerability could be a strength and that opening up to others did not make her weak, but rather stronger. Vincent had become an anchor in her life. And with his support and Felix's lessons in mind, Marianne began to realize that every challenge was a chance for growth. Life still presented uncertainties, but Marianne was now willing to face each one head-on. With renewed courage and Vincent's friendship by her side, she was ready to turn her journey into a story of overcoming and resilience. The debt was still a shadow, but now she had the tools to deal with it. And above all, she had hope. Marianne was at a turning point in her life, where each day brought new challenges and new lessons. After the exhibition in her studio, she felt lighter, but the reality of the debt still followed her like a shadow. With sales not being enough to cover her expenses, the pressure increased. However, instead of letting herself be defeated, she began to see the difficulties as opportunities for growth. Deep down, Marianne knew she needed to change her perspective. The sleepless nights and constant worries led her to question her own abilities. But looking at the pieces she had created, she began to realize that her art was an expression of her strength, of her struggle. Each stitch, each color represented a part of her journey. She recognized that despite the challenges, she had a talent that could be the key to her overcoming. She decided that she could no longer fight alone. With Vincent's help, she began to explore new ways to promote her work. Together, they researched market opportunities, looked for craft fairs, and even considered the possibility of selling online. The idea of expanding her horizons brought a new energy to Marianne. With every small action, she felt she was regaining control of her life. As she prepared for the upcoming event, Marianne started to understand the value of collaboration. Vincent helped her see that she didn't need to be perfect, that the authenticity of her art was what truly mattered. He encouraged her to open up more, to tell her story through her creations. This new approach resonated with her. By sharing her experiences, she could connect better with people and, who knows, touch their hearts. Marianne's new perspective began to manifest in her work. She created a series of pieces inspired by her struggle with debt and her anxieties. The vibrant colors and bold shapes reflected her determination not to be defined by her difficulties. With each new piece, she expressed not only her pain but also her hope and resilience. This transformation was not just about her art, it was about who she was becoming. As she worked, Marianne began to attract the attention of people in the community. Social media became a powerful tool for showcasing her work and telling her story. She started receiving messages of support and encouragement, making her realize that she was not alone. The community wrapped around her with care, and the connections she made helped her see that success was not just about money, but about building meaningful relationships. Her friendship with Vincent deepened during this time. They began to share not only work but also their hopes and fears. Marianne started to trust herself more, but also to accept his help without hesitation. She understood that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a strength, and that opening up to others could bring light to the darkest moments. Amid this growth, Marianne had a moment of reflection. During one of her sleepless nights, she thought about what success truly meant to her. It was no longer about material wealth or eliminating debt, but about living authentically, surrounded by love and support. She realized that, regardless of her financial difficulties, she had something valuable, the ability to create and the strength of her story. With this new wisdom, Marianne prepared for the upcoming event. Instead of worrying about what could go wrong, she decided to focus on what she could do best, share her art and her story. On the day of the event, she was nervous but also excited. The people who came were there to support her, and that filled her with courage. When she saw her works being admired, she felt that she was indeed on the right path. Marianne's journey was not easy, but each challenge helped her grow. She learned to trust herself more and to accept help from others. With each new victory, she felt stronger and more capable. Her experiences transformed her, and her friendship with Vincent helped her see the value of human connection. Marianne now understood that life is made up of ups and downs, and that by facing adversity with courage and love, it is possible to find new meaning, a new purpose. The day of the event had arrived, and Marianne felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The chosen venue was vibrant, filled with artists and their works. The smell of coffee and sweets in the air, while animated conversations echoed around, created a welcoming atmosphere. However, the pressure on Marianne's shoulders was palpable. With her debts still haunting her, she knew she needed to sell her pieces to gain financial relief. As she set up her booth, she noticed Vincent approaching with an encouraging smile. "Are you ready?" he asked, sensing the tension on her face. Marianne took a deep breath, trying to push away the doubts that tormented her. "I think so. Just, what if no one likes what I made?" Her voice trembled a little. Vincent tilted his head, looking her in the eyes. "Remember what you learned. Your art is your story. It's not about pleasing everyone, but about being true to yourself." His words resonated in her heart, and she smiled, feeling determination grow within her. With the booth set up, Marianne watched the flow of people passing by. Some stopped, admiring her pieces, but most moved on, and anxiety began to settle in again. The clock seemed to tick slower, and each minute that passed without a sale became an additional weight on her chest. She remembered her sleepless nights, the difficulties, and the insecurities. It was as if her struggle was laid bare there, in every stitch and color of her creations. When the event reached its peak, she saw a group approaching. They were people she recognized from social media, admirers who had commented on her art. Marianne's heart raced. A woman from the group began to gently touch one of her pieces, her eyes shining with interest. "This is beautiful. What inspired you to create it?" The question was simple, but it brought warmth to Marianne's heart. She took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She spoke about her struggles, her insecurities, and how each piece was a part of her journey. The woman listened attentively, and soon, others joined the circle. Marianne felt that by opening her heart, she was creating a genuine connection with those who were listening. The tension that had once dominated her slowly dissolved, and the art came to life through her words. As she shared her story, something magical began to happen. People started connecting with her experiences, and the atmosphere around them changed. They were not just seeing the art, they were feeling it. Sales began to happen, one after another, and each transaction felt like a small victory. Marianne saw faces light up as they took one of her pieces. They were taking a piece of her strength, her struggle, and her hope. However, the biggest challenge was yet to come. In the midst of the excitement, a woman approached, her expression serious. "I don't want to buy anything, but I need to talk to you." Marianne's heart raced. The woman explained that she was an art curator and was looking for new talents for a gallery in the city. However, there was a problem. She was concerned that Marianne's art, so personal and filled with emotion, might not connect with a broader audience. The word "no" echoed in Marianne's mind like a blow. The doubt she thought she had overcome came rushing back. What was she doing? Her art was an expression of her truth, but what if it wasn't enough? She looked at Vincent, who was beside her, offering an encouraging glance. He whispered, "Be yourself. That's what makes your art unique." With a trembling voice, Marianne decided to open up. "I understand your concerns, but this art is my heart. Each piece tells a story of struggle and overcoming. If it doesn't connect, At least I will be true to myself." The words flowed from her soul, and as she spoke them, she felt a wave of strength wash over her. The woman looked at her with new eyes. "Maybe you're right. That's what art should do. Touch people's hearts, even if not everyone understands." Marianne smiled, feeling a weight lift. The choice was clear. She preferred to be true to herself rather than conform to what others expected. The event came to an end, but Marianne's journey was just beginning. She had overcome her biggest challenge, recognizing that her art and her story were what truly mattered. Looking at her sales, they were not just numbers on a ledger, but reflections of her ability to connect with others. Vincent approached to congratulate her. "You were amazing. Did you see how people connected with you?" Marianne felt warmth in her chest. "Yes, and I realized that success isn't just about sales. It's about being authentic and touching lives." Her friendship with Vincent had solidified even more that day. Together, they found strength in each other. That experience not only helped her overcome her financial worries, but also made her understand that true success is living authentically, surrounded by people who support her. Marianne learned that her journey wasn't just about failures, but about new beginnings, and that each step brought her closer to her true essence. Marianne observed the movement around her, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. The event had ended, but that special day was etched in her memory. The joyful voices of the people who took her pieces echoed in her mind, and the sense of connection she had experienced was indescribable. She hadn't just sold her works, she had shared her stories, and that brought a new meaning to her art. As she dismantled her booth, Marianne found Vincent again. He was helping to pack the last pieces that remained. "You did it, Marianne. Not only did you sell, but you also touched people." "That's more than I expected," he said, with a sparkle in his eyes. Marianne smiled, but a shadow of worry crossed her face. "And now? What if I can't maintain that connection? What if next time isn't as good?" The anxiety she thought she had overcome seemed to want to return. Vincent stopped what he was doing and looked at her intently. "What you did today was incredible. You opened up and people felt that. Don't worry about the future. Focus on what you can control, your art and your truth." His words resonated in her heart, bringing a little more peace. In that moment, Marianne realized she was not alone. The community that had formed around her, with admirers of her art and the friendship of Vincent, was a support network that gave her strength. She decided that, regardless of the challenges she might still face, she would continue to be true to herself and her art. In the following days, Marianne received messages from several people she had met at the event. Some congratulated her on the sales, while others shared how her stories inspired them. There was a sense of belonging she had never felt before. With each message, her confidence grew. And with that, a new idea began to form in her mind, to create a space where she could share not only her works but also her experiences and those of other artists. Inspired, Marianne began planning a series of meetings in her small studio where local artists could gather, share their stories, and showcase their art. The goal was to create a welcoming environment where everyone could express themselves freely. She wanted people to feel like they belonged to something bigger, just as she had felt at the event. As she worked on the preparations, a new message arrived. It was from the curator who had spoken with her during the event. She wanted to meet to discuss a possible exhibition. Marianne felt butterflies in her stomach, but instead of fear, what she felt was a wave of excitement. She remembered Vincent's words and what she had learned. If the curator wanted to see her, it was because there was something valuable in her art. At the meeting, the curator expressed interest in exploring the stories behind the works more deeply. Marianne felt relieved to realize that instead of trying to mold her art into something more commercial, she could continue to be authentic. They talked for hours, and the curator was impressed by Marianne's passion and sincerity. After the meeting, Marianne left the cafe with a broad smile on her face. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to embrace every opportunity that came her way. The pressure of her debts still existed, but now there was hope. She was willing to fight for her passion, and that was already a victory. Over time, the meetings in her studio became a success. Artists of different styles and stories gathered to share and support each other. Marianne realized that by creating a safe space, she was not only helping others but also healing herself. Art and community became an essential part of her life, and the connection she sought solidified into bonds of friendship and collaboration. Marianne looked to the future with a new perspective. She knew the journey would be full of challenges, but she was ready to face them. With her art, her truth, and the community around her, she had found not only a path to survival but a life filled with meaning and purpose. At the end of the day, the true victory was not just in her sales but in embracing who she truly was. Marianne looked around her workshop, now filled with life and laughter. Artists of different styles and stories gathered there, creating a vibrant space of creativity and support. The transformation she had experienced in the last few months was remarkable. Not only had her sales increased, but so had her confidence and sense of belonging. What had started as a solitary event had turned into a united community. She remembered the fear she had felt before the event, when she thought her art would not be enough. Now, looking at the pieces she had created, she felt warmth in her heart. Each brushstroke, each sculpture told a part of her story, and by sharing them, she had not only freed herself but also inspired others to do the same. Marianne realized that the true victory was not in sales but in the connections she had made and the lives she had touched. As the exhibition approached, Marianne felt excited but also nervous. However, remembering Vincent's words, she decided not to let anxiety take over. Instead, she focused on being authentic and telling her stories in the truest way possible. The curator had believed in her, and that encouraged her to believe in herself. Over the months, the workshop had become a refuge for many. Marianne organized workshops, lectures, and even small exhibitions where other artists could showcase their work. She saw people who had once felt lonely and insecure blossom, finding their voice and confidence. The stories they shared were diverse, but they all had one thing in common: the quest for acceptance and the need to express themselves. Her friendship with Vincent also grew stronger. He became a partner not only in the workshop activities but also a close friend who was always willing to listen and support. They laughed together, shared dreams, and even dealt with challenges that arose. Marianne realized that true wealth was not just in sales or success, but in the relationships she cultivated along the way. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. Marianne's anxiety floated between excitement and nervousness, but she was ready. When the doors opened and visitors began to enter, she felt butterflies in her stomach, but also immense joy. Each compliment and each admiring glance was a reminder of how much she had grown. People were there not only to see her work but to hear her stories. At the end of the night, looking at the room full of people talking and laughing, Marianne knew it had all been worth it. She had found her place in the world. Her journey had not been easy, but each challenge had made her stronger and more determined. The lessons learned, the wisdom gained, and the friendships forged were the true treasures she would carry with her. Now, she felt ready for new challenges. With a smile on her face, Marianne decided she would continue to create and share, knowing that art had the power to connect people in deep ways. And so, looking to the future, she embraced the certainty that the journey would never end, but with each step, she would become more authentic and fulfilled. Marianne's story is a reminder that we can all overcome our fears and find our way. If you've ever felt lost or insecure, know that it is possible to start over and transform your life. Share your experiences and reflections in the comments. Together, let's build a community of support and inspiration. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the strength we have within us. The time to act is now.